All right, Cassie, thanks so much for being on the Friends with Wheels podcast. If I could start off by asking how to tell the audience a little bit about you and how you started, we can go from there.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and I really appreciate the content that you bring out into the world. I got started in this line of policy and democracy advocacy after really having my life impacted by public education, public policy, public access to things since I was a young child. I grew up in rural Kentucky and found the public library, to be such a benefit to my life. It's actually how I found information about joining the military, which is what I did when I was 17, which allowed me to go to college because they paid for that with the GI Bill, which is publicly funded. And going to college, I actually got into analytics and research, and I took that into a tech career for about 13 years and really developed my skills on customer experience, customer support, how to give access to something to many people and be able to educate them in the process and help them do what they were wanting to do. And after 13 years, which was a long time, I wanted to shift that into more public access to tech for good. And that, when I started to look at it, really was around the policies that govern us and people having impact and influence over what those policies were. And to understand what those are, we need to know what they say. We need to know when they're being voted on. We need to know what representatives are voting in which way for them. And that's how I got started in the work of digital democracy and at the Northwest Progressive Institute for lobbying, and then the stuff that I do on my channel, breaking down legislation.
hmm let's talk a little bit about sort of like 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 since you're from Kentucky, how was it like to grow up with like access to sort things like education and sort of other important tools that people need? Because I'm from Seattle, but I don't know how you grew up in Kentucky. Was there sort of like an easy access to certain things like education to um things that are essential, or what was that like?
Uh, my parents made a pretty difficult decision because access to education was limited. There were, in the counties that I grew up, there was one county high school. There might have been a private religious school, like a Christian based school, something nearby in the county, but it would have been one option. And then there's one county high school or one county elementary school, one county middle school. And I'm the oldest of five. And so for my parents to drive five kids to three different schools that are somewhere in the giant county of where we live, that was just going to be an impossible task. And my parents made a decision to start to homeschool us at a very young age and do an accredited program that came from out of state. So that allowed us to get the education that they felt at the time was at a higher degree than the county education that was provided where we were at in Kentucky. And we did that. I did that through 12th grade. So when I went to college, was the first time I had been back at a public education in a public school since I was in kindergarten.
That's cool. So like because I'm always like curious, like what are some in terms of like equal access and access to things. I'm always very curious about like how cities like because I live in Seattle. It's pretty much I live in the urban area. It's kind of very sort of um uh well-known developed area with access to things. You were from Kentucky, and so that might be a little bit different. So like can you give an insight into as to like what are some of the differences between the urban versus rural sort of access side of things when it comes to things like education and the public school system or anything in between?
Sure. And Seattle is my favorite city in the United States. So I love it. I am there most of the time nowadays. I just moved there last year. And what I've noticed already and why Seattle is one of my favorite places is because there's so much public transportation to actually get you access to those public institutions, like the public libraries that are in all of the different neighborhoods and the different school choices that are available. In Kentucky, this would have been in the 90s. The closest high school was 30 minutes away. So that would have been a 30-minute bus drive plus all of the bus stops on the way, or a 30-minute drive for my parents to make every single day one way. The libraries were available in all of the towns though. And when we lived about 15 minutes out of town. Another time we lived 30 minutes out of town. They had a library mobile. I don't know if you've ever seen a book mobile,
Nope.
but it's so cool because it's kind of like a bigger van where they have a ramp in the back so people can get on or off if they're in a wheelchair. There's some steps up the side, and there's one librarian who drives this bookmobile out to more rural neighborhoods, which is where we lived on this farm. And they bring books that you would have to go all the way into town to get access to. And so, for a family like ours with five little kids, my mom loved the monthly bookmobile access because they would just drive up and you'd get to go in there and it was like, oh, I get to visit this van full of books, pull out a few books, you check them out just like you would at a library, you return the ones that you had, and you get to do the same thing next month. It was a beautiful public service that was provided in the county for families that live far away. And I think that's something that's very unique, where in Seattle, I see in neighborhoods, and I lived in Dallas, Texas for a long time. So I saw in neighborhoods where neighborhood communities would build little library boxes and you could go up and exchange books. So, not the full library, but another place for education, access to information, access to books, which change our lives. And I think that's something that's changed my life, my entire life, and still continues to do so.
Hmm.
That's a
Let's
little
talk a
bit
little bit
about
about,
public access. Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, that's so cool. Like all this book bans and yeah, that is so cool. Um, I didn't know they had that. Do they still have that?
It's really cool. I don't know if they still do, but I'll look it up. And when you post this, I'll find a picture of what it looked like from the 1990s, and I'll put it as a comment under the video so you can see what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So like talk a little bit about digital democracy. What's that all about?
Yeah, I fell in love with this application. So digitaldemocracyproject.org is a free resource where you and I can go. You don't have to log in, you don't have to be from America or anywhere specific, and you can look up bills, like current legislation that's in your state and that's in the federal government, and you can see what is the name of the bill. You can see a bill summary, and you can see how people are voting on it. You can see pros and cons. You can see organizational positions that are for it or opposed to it. And then you have the option to actually vote on the bill if you're a registered voter in the United States of America. Because in the United States of America, only citizens can vote. You have to be a registered voter. You have to be a citizen. That's the current system that we're in. But if you are, wherever you live in the United States, you can go to Digital Democracy Project, sign up to vote on a bill that impacts your current state or federal legislation, and make your opinion known. And Digital Democracy Project will actually take the votes that are there and we send them to the appropriate legislative aides or legislative representative. So if we're in the state of Washington, the bills that are in there are ones I put in myself. So you can go there, you can see the bills that are under the state of Washington. And once the session is over, which just ended March 14th, I believe, we send a synopsis to our representatives and say, here's how people in the district, here's how people in Washington state, registered voters, voted on this legislation that you guys were voting on. Because our representatives are people we elected. They should be responsible to how we are thinking and feeling since we put them in that position.
Hmm. So, what I'm wondering is, like, how does the how does the sort of disability aspect piece of this tie into your work, if at all? Like what sorts of things are you doing on that front in terms of digital democracy to help people with disabilities access to voting or to education, that kind of stuff?
Yes, I love this question because one, you can vote from your phone or from your laptop, which or desktop computer, meaning you don't have to leave your home. You don't have to go to Olympia from wherever you are within the state. If we take the state of Washington, if we take the state of Texas, which is much larger, you don't have to drive from El Paso all the way over to Austin to where the state capital is. You can vote from your phone. You can vote from the comfort of the chair that you get to sit in, right? And the legislative teams can see how people in their districts are voting because you're able to use accessibility software to read what's on the page, to hear what's on the page. You're able to then understand what is in this bill, how are people talking about it. And it is something that also allows you to see what are bills that would impact people within the state given different conditions. Right now, in the state of Washington, we had some legislation that we were following up on people changing their last name or people having their gender being what they want on their license, like their driver's license, if they have a driver's license, or on their ID card, and that the state and other institutions don't need to know about that. So making it more accessible through legislation for people to identify the way that they would like to identify and for people to vote on that legislation wherever they are in the state or in the nation. I think those are some couple easy ways. We are always looking for suggestions on how to improve the application itself and ways that it would make it easier for people to be involved.
Hmm. Let's talk about the YouTube channel. How did that come to be?
I feel like it came out of me wanting to share in longer form how would I educate myself on legislation and what does it take to go through a bill. And when I started to do these, it's like, well, it takes maybe an hour, 2 hours. You've got to read the bill, you have to read the specific acts that those bills are referencing, and then I want to contact my representative about it. So I wanted to teach that, really. I wanted to make that accessible, free education to anybody who wanted to pay attention and listen and join in or request certain legislation be reviewed, and in a way that it wasn't here's what you need to think about it, it's here's how to think about it. How do you get to take the time to understand the words that are being used, why those are the words being used, where is it in a process, and what can we do with it from there. And I feel like it's been my lifelong goal of ensuring more people have access to education, to human rights, to technology, which can then impact things in a mass.
Hmm.
So
And
that's where it came from.
hmm and how are you like reaching out to people, like on your YouTube channel or like make, making them more engaged? Because I know with TikTok, people that's like the medium right now, and people are so actively engaged on that, and they're of course I don't have TikTok, I don't use TikTok, but audience engagement is has become a thing. So like how are you doing that, like communicating with them effectively? Because like in the social media realm, we live in silos. It can be really
Mhm.
hard to, there's a lot of information going on. So,
Yes. And this is where I spent 13 years in a SaaS company with social media analytics. So 2012, I started working with a company that it's not the same name anymore, but it's called NetBase at the time. And we did social media analytics. And I got to consult and advise brands and agencies all over the world on their social media strategy. So, what I definitely learned and coached on there, which is what I'm using here, is cross channel updates and information. And so what I will do is I do my long form things on YouTube because I want the visual, I need an hour and I want to be able to show what I'm looking at how to highlight that, have all of the descriptions. Those are not things that play well on Instagram or TikTok. So then I'll take snippets from those long forms and put them on TikTok or Instagram, or I'll do a live TikTok after I've posted the long video on YouTube and reference back to the YouTube video for all of the information. So that way, kind of using Blue Sky, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. I don't have a Facebook. That was just one I just didn't want to get back into.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm doing. But I am always, again, open to suggestions and very curious to see who engages where and on what type of content. They like the TikTok part, I kind of keep it on my heart talks, is what I'm talking about. Because
Hmm.
I don't want to get into hot takes and, you know, more clickbait information. I want it to be something that you feel like you learned if you sat through my video, whether it was a minute or whether it was five, that you got to learn something and you just have more questions. So that's kind of where I use TikTok the most. And then Instagram does better with pictures most of the time.
Yeah. 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 It does mostly with pictures, I think. Um, my next question is, what have you learned in doing this kind of work at like Digital Democracy, your YouTube channel, or the other organization that you mentioned?
Oh yeah, Northwest Progressive Institute is an institute that's based in Redmond, Washington. So just across the Washington Lake from Seattle, which we now have the Cross Lake connection, and you can ride public transportation from Seattle all the way over. So we're
Yeah.
really excited about that. More helpful disability and able-bodied ways to get from one place to another, right? We
Yeah.
need more of that. So that just opened this past Saturday. We had a party in Mercer Island to celebrate the opening of that station and
Hmm.
of the rail. So with Northwest Progressive Institute, that's where I'm really getting to practice lobbying and going after some of the bills that we want to support and bills that we want to oppose, sitting in public hearings and testifying in public hearings about the bill. With Northwest Progressive Institute, we do a lot of news media to keep people and the public informed about what's happening in Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. We do cover national news also, but for the most part, it is this local Pacific Northwest. How do we continue to make progressive change, even in a fairly progressive state?
Hmm.
And what have I learned across the three? I think for which was your question, there is space for everyone. I think what I keep learning is there is people want information and it's fun to play around on social media. It's fun to have things that refresh us or energize us, but people are energized by different things and the world needs to hear your voice. And if it's something that you've looked around for and you're not seeing, maybe that's something that you want to participate in providing and giving back. And think for me with Northwest Progressive Institute, I do a lot of book reviews. So I get to read, which I love to do, which I've always loved to do. And I get to write book reviews on what I'm reading, and I share those out with the public. So maybe someone else doesn't know if they want to read that book, or maybe they don't have time, but they'd like a little bit of a synopsis from it. I get to provide that there, or I get to provide I'm willing to be a face and someone who's publicly standing up for specific legislation. I can help. I can provide that too. And that's on one end. The other end is like, how do I help provide access to these legislative bills? And how do I help explain them? That kind of triangle was something I wasn't seeing yet in the world. And I'd like to create more of. And that's really what I'm learning to do in the process of like, how do I figure out how to do that better, smoother, um, at a pace that other people are looking for.
Hmm. And I forgot to ask this question, like, because obviously you're working at the Digital Democracy Project, and then you have your YouTube channel, and then the institute, like
Mhm.
what was that sort of fire that instilled you to do work on policy work? Did you like do that at a young age or something? Because I know many folks who've been in high school, they've done student council, they've done active organizations. So did you do something like that or?
No, I didn't at all. I wasn't involved in any of those. I really was very focused on startup technology. I worked for a company in California. I lived in Texas. I traveled somewhere every week for 4.5 years. So I was quite wrapped up in my own world of like, how do we make this social media a thing? How do we understand what people are talking about? And how do we get brands that information about what people are talking about? And when I saw this moving, it was very cool to be a part of. But as it continued to move forward, I think what I consistently found is corporations are out for corporations. They are there for their stakeholders. They are there to make money. They are there to get to a bottom line dollar. And that's what they exist for. And I don't fault them for that. That's why they're there. Sometimes they make products that are really cool and really helpful. And sometimes, they just make some products. But what I wanted to be able to do, taking all of what I had learned, is how do I consult, knowing that that's what corporations are going to do, how do I make it more of we the people have power? Because it just seemed constantly to be more of an imbalance. And the more I read about it, the more I worked in it, the more I was like, this is so imbalanced. How do we start to turn it around? And I'm a big believer in nonviolent communication. I'm a huge believer in non-reformist reform and using the system as leverage against itself to update and change things. The curb effect, when I read the research on the curb effect, it really just shifted my mind to understand that when we build things for the margins, if we build things for people who need a little bit more access, everybody in the middle is also served by that. And in a way of wanting to be in public service, and in a way of wanting to change small things for many people, policy seemed to be the place to be able to do it, at least here in the United States. That's where we have legal definitions. That's where court cases hold up. That's where cities and states have to abide by certain rules. And that's where I got really, really curious on how can I make a change with the tech skills that I have. And that's
Mhm,
how it shifted. Yeah, I left my corporate long term
mhm.
lovely job, which I loved. I loved working there and I loved my teams. That was in November of 2024, so it was right after the election in 2024. And it was this, I need to take a break and then I'm going to shift into how can I make a bigger change.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen a lot of people do that, go from the corporate world into taking that break and then doing something else.
Yeah,
And
doing something else. But it was something that felt like, oh, I I want to do this. Even if the question I asked myself was, if I worked on something for the rest of my life and it never made a difference, like it never changed while I was alive, what would I want those things to be? And the list was, oh, I could work on, women's rights, women's health access. I could work on human rights, I could work on disability rights, I could work on voter rights, I could work on transportation rights, public education rights, any of those in the list. Those are things that if it never changed in my lifetime, I would be proud to work on them while I was here. And that's when I was like, it's time to make a shift because I actually think I can make a change. So
hmm
that's how it
and
happened.
yeah, I bet. So my next question is, like, what are some of the things that you guys are doing in Digital Democracy Project that are coming up or that people should know about?
Yes, we are launching to the rest of the 50 states. So, our proof of concept started in Florida with Florida state legislation. Then it expanded to federal legislation. And then we expanded to 6 more states. So, our next goal is the rest of the states. And we want to do that by the end of 2027 because we want to be prepared for the general election in 2028. So our next goal is, how do we connect with more organizations? How do we connect with more volunteers who would want to review and add bills for their specific states, and getting more of a community together. We have a fantastic, really fun Slack channel, and we do all of our work on there with each other. We host monthly national legislation calls where we talk about the bills that are in there and how to vote on them. But we do a lot of going to groups. Like I got to go to Fix Democracy First a couple of weeks ago and talk to them about Digital Democracy Project. We've gone to Indivisible and we talk with them, League of Women Voters. We are nonpartisan. We don't support a party. We bring the issues that are in legislation and the specific bills that are in our legislation up for a vote for the American people. So that's our next goal, is how to launching out to the rest of the 50 states.
Mm-hmm. And my last question is, like looking back and sort of what you've had to experience, like with growing up in Kentucky and all the things that you've had that have been going for you and to where you are now, what can you sort of look back on and reflect as to how you've sort of um made a difference in the world? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good one. It is constantly staying curious and asking questions on, well, I see that the system works this way right now, but why does it work that way? Does it have to work that way? And always remembering that someone built what we see in front of us. People decided, people built what we see in front of us that's working as a system, that's working as a technology. And that can be changed by other people reviewing it and saying, this doesn't really work for the general population anymore. This doesn't work for everybody. So, how do we get involved in shifting it to something that works for what 2026 looks like? This was built in 1996. That's 30 years ago. We want to decide, how do we shift this over to something that works for us now? So I feel like the changes that I've made are access to more for many people, especially around social media, but now around policy. But it is consistently keeping a curious mindset and reminding people, a person built this, a human built this. We could rebuild it. Somebody just imagined this. They put it together. That takes time and people and money and an intelligent groups of people that come together. But we could do that a different way. It doesn't have to be the way that you see it. We can envision something better and work towards that. And I feel like my superpower has always been seeing things that don't exist yet and getting an opportunity to build those into something that actually works for more of us.
Mhm. And how can this sort of experience like digital democracy now like be a catalyst for the next generation who want to do something?
I feel like it gets into mobile voting. I feel like this type of a catalyst gets the next generation into being able to securely vote on your phone, not having to go in person to a site for an election, not having to spend the whole day waiting in line in locations that are rural or only have one place to vote. I feel like this, for the next generation, allows people to understand what's in their legislation, what policies actually govern them, and to then be able to take a step back and say, that doesn't work for us. We want to modify this. We want to elect people that are going to make that different, and we're going to hold them accountable to making it different. And we'll be able to track how they voted. I think the toughest part about legislation is there are so many bills and the seasons are very short, and there is no recap that comes back out to registered voters that says, here's who you elected, here's what they were elected about, and then here's what they did afterwards. But a digital democracy project allows us to do that in real time, and it's accessible for free. You don't have to get a subscription to access it. And so that is what I'm most excited about for the next generation. And hopefully we get to use it in ours too.
Hmm. And for people who want to learn more about you, your work, what can they do?
Yeah, thank you. I have a link tree, and they can go to my link tree. It's at at Cup of Calculated Curiosity, and I can throw that in the tag. But it's my thing anywhere else is Coffee and Calculated Curiosity, and I have links to Digital Democracy Project, my channels, and Northwest Progressive Institute, since those are all of the things that I support and do.
Yeah, I like the title of your YouTube channel,
Like the title.
Calculated Curiosity. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I spend a lot of time caffeinated and thinking. So
That's
more
cool.
questions.
All right. On that note, okay.